We're about to go live. As soon as we go live, we're going to start. As soon as I hear the magic words.
Mayor Weber, you are now live.
Very good. Thank you very much. I would like to call the regular meeting of the governing body to order July 10 at 5:04 p.m. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilor Chavez. Can I presume upon you to take us down that path? And then the salute to the flag from Councilor Lindell and Councilor Mayor, you can offer us invocation and remembrances. Please rise as you're able.
Good evening, everyone. For the invocation tonight, I offer this. Dear Lord, we thank you for the blessings of our diverse team and council. We ask that you guide us to appreciate the value of our different gifts and perspectives, understanding that when we unite, we can do more than we can do alone. Help us recognize and use our differences to benefit the team, the council, the governing body, the community, and its mission. Give us the strength and courage to rise to challenges, learn from each other, and embrace the richness of our diversity. May we never take our unique strengths for granted, but rather use them to build a stronger community, team, council, governing body. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there specific remembrances tonight? Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to remember a great friend to the recovery community, Juan Valdez, that passed away a couple of days ago. I've known Juan for a couple of decades, and he was a guy that walked the walk, and he actually at one time he was the I believe city manager under Sam Peck, and he was quite a character. He found sobriety, I don't know exactly how long ago, 26, 28 years ago. And he was a guy that in his sober living, he opened his home, called it Juan's Sober Living House. He opened his own home to people that were struggling to get sober. And numerous times I remember Juan saying that, oh man, I came home, all my furniture was gone, everything was gone. But you know what? It didn't deter him. He was there for people that wanted to move through their addiction at whatever pace and whatever ability they were able to, and he never gave up on them. Never. He was a great friend to the 12-step community in this city, and almost anybody that participates in that program has heard Juan say, and have a wonderful day. So Juan, have a wonderful journey.
Any others? Well, let's remember Juan, but also keep in mind those in our community who are dealing with their own challenges, who are struggling with problems of health and well-being, of sickness, of poverty, of struggles in their own lives. Let's extend our thoughts to them as well and take a moment and keep them in our hearts. Thanks, everybody. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Castro.
Presente.
Councilor Chavez. Councilor Faulkner.
Here.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Councilor Lindell.
Here.
Councilor Romero Worth.
Here.
Mayor Weber.
Present.
Mayor, Yava quorum.
Thank you. And Councilor Cassidy is excused. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well, and I believe Counselor Lee Garcia will be here shortly. He's a little bit delayed in his arrival, but will be with us. Are there changes to the agenda? Madam City Attorney.
Mayor, councilors, we've received a request for an accommodation in relation to the land use appeal that we have later this afternoon or evening, to move it to immediately after petitions from the floor. And after speaking with staff about that, I do recommend that we amend the agenda that way or adopt the agenda with that modification. That would be putting the appeal immediately after petitions from the floor.
Okay, so that would require a motion and a vote.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to move the land use case so that it will follow petitions from the floor. And I'm going to make an assumption that the different parties have been notified that this could potentially be the change in the agenda, and they'll all be able to be here in a timely fashion.
Mayor, councilors, that's my understanding, is that we have reached out. I'll confirm.
Okay. Discussion? Can you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Castro. Counselor Chavez.
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell. Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Segundo.
Very good. Discussion? Madam Clerk, could you call the roll on the approval of the agenda as amended?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Chavez.
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell. Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Counselor Castro.
Sí.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, was anything taken off of the consent agenda?
No, Mayor, nothing was removed.
Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda in that case?
Move to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, can you call the roll on the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Chavez.
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell. Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Counselor Castro.
Sí.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Very good. Thank you. And so, Madam Clerk, that takes us to item 8A. If you could introduce it and bring our presenter to the podium.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Item 8A is the state of the Santa Fe Municipal Court, and this will be presented by Judge Chad Chittum of the Municipal Court.
Your Honor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Judge Chittum, Mayor Weber, counselors. Thank you for having me here today. Part of my duties as the municipal court judge is to present to this governing body a couple of times a year. And so that being said, I do provide stats to the governing body monthly. In addition, I'd like you to feel free to reach out if you ever had any questions about court access procedures, et cetera. Just please don't wait till these meetings to reach out. So thank you. Today, I want to give you a brief overview of the municipal court, give you some information regarding our court programs, and a few highlights, and let you know of a couple of changes that are coming through at the court. So as most of you may know, that I've been at the municipal court since 2016. I was a city prosecutor, staff attorney, and then now as the elected official. Couple of things in general about the municipal court. The Santa Fe Municipal Court is more like a magistrate court than a municipal court. And what I mean by that is in volume. The size of the municipal court is, we are probably one of the top 3 volume-wise municipal courts in the state. And so because of that, when we go to trainings or whatnot with all the municipal courts, we are again more like a magistrate than a municipal court, because as of today, Bosque Farms, a clerk came up from Bosque Farms to watch our clerks and do a little bit of training. They hold court 2 days out of the month. We hold court every single day. So just as a reference point. Some of the cases that we see, the majority of our cases are going to be your traffic non-jailable, your speeding, your insurance, your red light violations. We do have DWIs, first, second, and third offenses. Anything over that will go to the district court. We do shoplifting, criminal trespass. Shoplifting has a jurisdiction of under $250. So anything over $250 or $250 would go to the magistrate court. We do disorderly conduct, resisting, evading, or obstructing an officer, concealing identity. In addition to those charges or those case types, we do have juvenile cases, and that's under 18. Now, the vast majority of our juvenile cases are non-jailable, speeding, driving while without a driver's license, those types of things. The majority, if they are jailable offenses, go to juvenile probation officers and also to the children's court. So we do not see shoplifting cases for teens, reckless driving, DWIs, or other misdemeanors. Like I said, those go to the other courts. Now, in regards to that, why do I bring that up? In regards to the teens, in the past, the court would refer teens to the Santa Fe County Teen Court. Because of our limited jurisdiction, and because I would like to start up a Santa Fe Municipal Court teen program, we will not be referring teens to the Santa Fe County Teen Court program any longer. One of the reasons is we're going to focus on sentencing based on the nature of the charge and the teen's personalized needs. And what I mean by that is currently, the teen court program at the Santa Fe County, a no driver's license charge, which is punishable up to $25 fine in our court. They'd have them do 24 hours of community service, a few other things. What I would like to do as the judge, and if there's sentencings based on their needs, is instead of requiring that 24 hours of community service, require them to get their driver's license, or require them to show proof that they are trying to obtain that driver's license, because some of that takes a lot of time. In addition, a teen runs a red light. Instead of community service, have them provide the court proof of perfect attendance at school. Something that they can already do, that they're already doing, versus adding on. So again, I just want to we're not referring as many teens to the Santa Fe Teen Court, and we will no longer continue to do so based on the number of cases that we get and the type of cases that we get. In addition, I've gotten a lot of feedback from parents. Teens are more active today than when the teen court started and we were sending them. They have after school programs, they're working, and we're trying to, again, personalize it. What do they need? Let's recognize some stuff that they're already doing, encourage attendance, encourage GED classes and things like that. Which leads me to my next topic, is a little bit of an overview of the programs at the municipal court. We do have a DWI drug court program. And just like I stated, or it states, the DWI is mostly for second offenders, third offenders, but it can be for shoplifters, etc. And I'm happy to report today we are working on getting that certification. We are at 87% meeting the mandatory requirements, and we are at 70% meeting the recommended requirements for that certification. We've been working with the administrative offices of the courts for doing that. I'd like to thank the DWI drug court team just for a minute. That includes David Thomas, the public defender, Kyle Hibner, the city prosecutor, and Lieutenant Montano of the police department. They are essential into getting this program where it's at, and their time and the commitment that everybody's put into it. I'm very grateful and thankful for them. We also have our outreach court program. Again, that's a collaboration with the city prosecutor, Mr. Hibner, the public defender, David Thomas, and the court. It is a program that recognizes what a defendant is already doing to meet their court requirements. And these defendants are generally precariously housed or homeless. And we've been having that program for a couple of years now, but I'm happy to report this last week, we sent out information. We're opening it up to veterans, to all of our veterans, regardless of their housing, whether it's precarious or not. We had it sent out to the community to include our veterans in the outreach court. We have a pretrial service program. If somebody comes in and they have shoplifting, a couple of shoplifting cases, we can have them go to our pretrial service coordinator. She will do an assessment and give them recommendations, give them referrals to housing, treatments, and different things like that. Those are the current programs. I'm excited about some of the up and coming new programs that we would like to install. One of them is going to be the First Offenders Program. That's for, as it states, for first offenders, non-DWIs. And it can be utilized by the public defender and city prosecutor for pretrial diversion. And it also can be used to get a case dismissed without a conviction by order of the court. The four main focus areas on the first offenders program are going to be a defensive driving aspect, an anger management aspect, a service providers where we give them information about Santa Fe Connect and all the service providers that are in this city and county, in addition to a mindfulness. In addition to that program, we would like to install an 18 to 25-year-old young offenders program. And we want to separate that age group because it's important for that age group to know that being young is not forever, but some of the things they do, their consequences can last for a very long time. And so we want to try to make sure that we address that and those issues at that age group. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, this teen court program that we would like to sentence and focus on our teens and their specialized needs and based on the nature of their charges. Lastly, some highlights I'd like to point out is the hybrid court that we have. By New Mexico Supreme Court order, we have to, for most cases, offer the ability for the public and officers to attend court hearings virtually. So we do that, but instead of just doing that, people can attend in person as well. So I am on the bench daily. I preside from the bench at the courthouse, but any given day, any given time, someone may be attending via Zoom video, via Zoom telephone, or they can appear in person. And as I like to tell defendants, you have the option to appear those ways. So there's no reason why you don't need to, you can miss court. You could show up because you can appear those ways. So I hope that that helps address some failure to appears, and also the days of staying in the municipal court for hours on end, waiting for your case to be called. Hopefully we've addressed that. I've talked about a couple more things. I'll be brief. The language access specialist program that we have, I've talked about this a couple of times, but I think it's so important. So I'm going to continue to talk about it. 8 of our staff members can have their certification in language access specialists. That's from the offices of the administrative offices of the courts. It is a certification where they can interpret in court. And when you have half your staff that has that certification, it really opens up access to the court and doesn't have the court have to cause delays by getting an interpreter. We have the interpreter there. Another great highlight of the court, I believe, is we have in-house public defender and prosecutor, which is great because they both have offices there at the municipal court. So they're both available at a moment's notice if something comes up. In addition, both of these lawyers have over 10 years of experience. So these lawyers, this public defender and the city prosecutor it's a great wealth of knowledge, and it's a great experience to have there at the municipal court. In addition to, a little bit different from the state, we do not have an application fee for the public defender. At the state, someone that applies for a public defender has to pay $10. We do not do that, which I think is a great asset. Last but not least, a couple of things that are moving into the future is I will be posting a position for a staff attorney shortly. You may recall I used to be the staff attorney for Judge B. Hill. I wanted to wait and see once we got the rhythm of the court as me as a judge to see. At this point, I would like to hire and post that position for a staff attorney. Lastly, part of these programs I want to implement, I would like to change the court's deputy finance administrator position into a courts program director. And that courts program director would have to have the educational requirement of a master's degree in social work and or therapy. And that person would help the court implement, develop, and maintain these court specialty programs. The thought is to have all these programs under the umbrella of the municipal court, all in-house, but also hire someone with the education to help develop those programs. I have the legal background. Someone else would have the education in therapy and or social work. So that's what I have to present to you today. Again, please, if you would like to reach out to me at any time, please do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are questions, comments by members of the governing body? Yeah, Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see Judge Chittum. I thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate some of the approaches that you're bringing into your tenure, in particular, looking at the youth from a perspective of a proactive prevention and rehabilitation process versus purely punitive. I think that's, I mean, as you said, folks are young, they're dumb, they do stupid things, but we want to make sure that they learn from it and they grow from the experience. And hopefully they can then have that ripple effect to their peers. That way their peers can learn and grow from it as well. One question for you around community service. And this is purely because we've got an issue later on today dealing with fines. And how often do you offer community service in lieu of a fine? And what is the metrics that you use for that? Because I think you mentioned for a person who's driving without a driver's license, a $25 ticket, they got 24 hours of community service. Is that typical? I mean, is there a rubric you use, or can you help me understand the process a little more?
Well, absolutely. So yes, the state municipal court procedures, the judge can assess a person's ability to pay fines and fees. And a part of that, if we assess that they are not able to pay those fines and fees, we can convert that to community service. In addition, a couple of years ago, they did allow the courts to also, besides community service, they could do serve treatment in lieu of fines and fees. They could do a GED, work training, and those different types of things. For community service specifically, the rate is $24 an hour. That's the conversion rate.
So using those metrics, if a fine is $25, but we're making them do 24 hours of community service, that is pretty excessive in regards to, it's roughly 24 times the value of the fine.
Correct, exactly. And so that's why one of the reasons when I mentioned the 24 hours of community service for a red light violation for teens, that would be the county's program. And that's what the Santa Fe County's teen court program is doing at this point. Hence why I want to move away from that and not do so much community service in the sense of instead of having them do community service, get that GD classes or at least sign up for them, or do perfect attendance at school, something like that. Away from it. But if someone has been fined, an adult has been fined $200, let's say, for example, it is $24 by state statute that is converted per hour.
Thank you for helping me understand that. And then you had mentioned staff support, which you determine how much staff you need and I'm full support of that. But just from the budget perspective, just want to make sure it's in the budget right now. If not, we've got to start potentially looking for the resources to.
It's in the budget. So the staff attorney has been in the budget. I was previously staff attorney. I've left that position open up until now. I want to post that position. So that has been budgeted. In addition to the programs director, I would be converting a finance administrative position into the programs director's position. I will be personally, with the assistance of a couple other paralegals, taking on more of the finance.
Okay, well, is that by choice or, I mean, just out of curiosity?
It is by choice.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you for taking on some work that usually is outside the perspective of a judge taking on some fiscal matters. So
We had to have that, and with the assistance of the finance department, it is very doable.
well, thank you, Judge. Wish you all the success, and if there's anything we can do to help you be successful in your role, please let us know.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No other questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Judge Chittum, for being here. And I know I caught the tail end of your presentation. Apologize for being late. I just had a couple questions regarding your office and how in the last couple of years we passed some legislation in ordinances that relate to, number one, mufflers. And from your perspective, how that is kind of working in terms of what you've seen in regards to infractions that have come before you and how you have dealt with those given the changes to our laws.
I appreciate that question, and I'm going to refer you to the city prosecutor to probably better to answer that type question. The reason being is by law, I'm prohibited to commenting on cases specifically that could come before me. I can tell you every case, such as the muffler cases that do come before me, I do handle them fair and impartially. But besides that, I would direct you to the city prosecutor to be able to better position to answer that question.
And that's fair. I thank you for that. And I think that it would be maybe appropriate to ask for a report from the city in regards to that and see how it's, how it's working and through getting factual data. I think as well, the other question I would have in regards to that, which may be the same answer, is we passed some legislation a couple years back in regards to infractions and how they would allow you or the city municipal court to maybe not for misdemeanor traffic violations, then when people couldn't pay their fines and so on and so forth, to not revoke driver's license and so on, which also I supported. However, don't know how that is coming across your office in the municipal courts and how that has been working as well.
And just in an abundance of caution, I would give you the same answer.
Okay, thank you.
That is an abundance of caution.
Sure. And I guess the only question I would be is has it helped the municipal court make judgment or be fair and impartial to people?
So I would say in general, the court costs this July have dropped from $56 to $17 based on state statute. And it is a bit early to see how that's helped with compliance. And so I can report back. I hope to report back in December, and that's something that I might can provide more stats on about compliance in regards to fines and fees based on some of the court costs from the state have gone down.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just kind of curious as to how that's helped or hasn't helped the municipal court and their day-to-day operations. No further questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Others? Thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate the presentation and also the innovations and the creativity you're bringing to the job. I think it's really exciting to hear how you're going to make some new changes, try some new things, and while maintaining the integrity and the history of the court, bring some fresh ideas. So congratulations, and we look forward to your next presentation.
very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do you want to take us to the next item on the agenda, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The next item is item 10, action items discussion agenda. 10A is consideration of a resolution sponsored by Councilor Lee Garcia. It's a resolution adopting the City of Santa Fe's Regional Annual Transit Service Plan for fiscal year 2025, accepting the NCRTD's fiscal year 2025 proposed funding of regional services provided by the city of $1,421,890 and approving submitting the city's regional annual transit service plan for fiscal year 2025 to the NCRTD's Board of Directors for approval. And we have the Transit Director of Administration, Gabrielle Chavez, here for questions.
Great. I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
There's there's a motion and then there's a or two. Before we get to, Counselor, did you want to introduce this before we get the director's overview?
I think I'll just go and let the director speak. The caption speaks pretty well for itself. But for questions and if there's any concerns the governing body has, you can lead to Director Chavez. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Director Chavez, thank you for being with us tonight. I think for both the public who may be watching and listening, and also for the governing body, people in the auditorium, maybe you would like to give us an overview of what this resolution does and what the benefits to the public will be. And you may want to hit the microphone button.
Now, can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm here to present the resolution that Councilor Garcia has sponsored on behalf of Transit. This resolution is a requirement of the NCRTD to share the regional transit gross receipts tax with the city of Santa Fe. It's designated fiscally every year. It's budgeted in the NCRTD budget. And this year it's for $1.4 million in gross receipts tax. This tax will pay for 4 of our routes. This would be the Route 22, which serves the New Mexico 599 rail runner. Also goes to Rancho Viejo and the Santa Fe Community College. It also would help pay for Route 2 and 4. This serves inbound and outbound rail runner trains at the South Capitol Station. It also helps provide for the Santa Fe pickup historic district shuttle operations. Right now, this is on-demand service. However, we do plan on re-implementing a more consistent service in the next couple of months. It also provides funding for special event services that accommodate visitors and residents, meet increased demand for rail runner transfers, provide shuttle services for folk art market, Spanish market, Indian market, and for annual community celebrations such as the Zobra and the Canyon Road Farolito Walk. I'm open to questions.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Lee Garcia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, to reiterate, there's a portion of gross receipts taxes that goes to the regional transit district every year that we have a right to get reimbursed to our transit facility. And so to the credit of Director Chavez, now that she came on board, she was very keen on finding out that we were able to get that by only submitting our transit plan to the NCRTD buses. So kudos to Director Chavez. Prior to her not being there, it was not being submitted. So we were forgoing the $1.4 million, which I think, again, it's important that we continue with this to bring in this money from the district, which is ours by the resolution that came forth through the NCRTD. So just a little bit of background and back on track. Thank you, Director Chavez.
Beautiful. Thank you. Questions, comments?
No, just de nuevo, muchas gracias.
Go ahead, Council.
Yeah, thank you so much for the hard work on this.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions? We have a motion. We have a second. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Sí.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Next item, Madam Clerk.
The next item is item 11, matters from the city manager.
Mr. City Manager, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Councilors, just briefly, just want to say a huge thanks to all the city staff who are out there making all of the summer events in Santa Fe a success. Santa Fe Pride, Juneteenth, the pancakes on the plaza, the summer scene, the concerts on the plaza, firefighters, police officers, ESD, you name it, parks, everyone. There is no event in the city that happens without significant input from the people who work for the city of Santa Fe. And they're doing an extraordinary job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Next item is item 12, matters from the city attorney.
Madam City Attorney.
Mayor Weber, Councilors, thank you. We do have 2 new employees who started in the city attorney's office this week. Please stop by and meet them. We've got Palmer Anderson, who's our new policy analyst, and we have Maciek, and I'm trying to look up his last name because it's hard to pronounce, but is one of our new records specialists. And we anticipate our second new records specialist to start in 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks, the next beginning of pay period, not next week, but the following one. At which point that group will be fully staffed. So we're very excited about that. And then I also recommend that we go into executive session for the purpose of, I'm pulling it up as well. We got to this so quickly today. Attorney-client privilege discussion of potential litigation. In particular, the AFL-CIO Local 3999 of the American Federation of the State, City, and Municipal Employees are after me regarding possible impasse leading to arbitration.
Very good. Councilor Mayor Worth, do you have a motion?
I do. So, it's I'm not seeing this on our agenda. Am I missing something? Yeah, and I just refreshed and I'm not seeing it. So, I don't know which, so I guess this is under 10-15-1H. Is that what we're doing? Here we go. Oh, here we go. H7. Okay. On the fly here. So I move we enter into executive session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, section 1015-1, subpart H7, for discussion of threatened or pending litigation in which the governing body is or may become a participant, including litigation with AFL-CIO Local 3999 of the American Federation of State, City, and Municipal Employees regarding possible impasse leading to arbitration.
Segundo.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Second, gotcha. I was looking the other way. There's a motion, there's a second. Is there discussion? Could you call the roll on this motion?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Sí.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
motion passed.
Very good. For those who just joined us, we will go into executive session. When we come back, we'll resume the agenda with the amendment that was made earlier, which would take the land use case and move it directly after petitions from the floor. So we'll come back from executive session. We'll have a few communications, one introduction of legislation, petitions from the floor as close to 7 o'clock as we can manage, and then we'll go directly into the land use case. After that, we'll resume the regular order of the agenda. Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, we're still rolling? All right, in that case, I will gavel us back into order and ask Counselor Merriworth to make a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1J, I move that the governing body reconvene in open session and state for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited to those specified in the motion for closure.
Segundo.
We have a motion. We have a second. Is there discussion? I think Counselor Lindell will be back with us in a minute, but we have a quorum. Could you call the roll then, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Sí.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes,
motion passed.
very good then. Let's go to the next item on the agenda, Madam Clerk.
Mayor, next item on the agenda is item 14, matters from the city clerk. I just want to remind folks that there will be a movie in the park on Friday at Swan Park. Movie starts at 6:30 and they will be playing Selena. There'll be a food truck, rainbow snow, and refreshments donated by Coca-Cola.
Wow. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome. Next item, Mayor, is communications from the governing body.
Outstanding. Let's just go down the line. Counselor Lee Garcia, you can kick us off, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I think that I don't really have a whole lot. I did in lieu of some recent information that's come about in regards to our risk assessment, would like to request a presentation to us or some sort of information to the governing body that kind of goes through the reports that were given and sent out, so we can all have a conversation over that. I think in regards to us spending money on this assessment, it'd be really great to know. I know that at one point I had, with the collaboration of a few other counselors, had requested to look into a Office of Inspector General. I know this was something that was done in lieu of that, but however, would like to hear a little bit more about that presentation. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. And Counselor Merriworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to flag the continuation of the livability series, speaker series. The next gathering is next Thursday, July 18th. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. And the title of the topic next week is "Why is affordable housing in such short supply? The role of neighborhood defenders." And we have Catherine Levine Einstein coming. She is the author of a book called Neighborhood Defenders. And she is the Associate Professor of Political Science at Boston University and Associate Director at the Initiatives on Cities. And she'll discuss how cities derive neighborhood input on new housing projects and how that currently shapes the way our cities grow or don't. She will share why neighborhood defenders, motivated residents who must often participate in local housing politics, often contribute to higher housing costs and the types of reforms that could lead to more representative participation. There is a reception that immediately follows. I believe there are tickets still available, and you can get them by going to the HomeWise site, and then there's a special site, livabilityspeakerseries.com. So just wanted to make people aware of that event going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Faulkner.
I have a couple of things. One, I'd like to announce the Pride Parade this weekend for the disabled community. I unfortunately will not be there because I'm on travel, but I really am excited about it and wish that I could have worked travel out differently. The second thing is I also would like to have the risk assessment presented to council. I think that'd be a great idea. And then thirdly, on accessibility, I know we're working on accessibility for the disabled community, but there are a lot of residents. We also have a lot of work to do with the disabled community, including accommodations for myself, but with regard to monolingual constituents, my district has a lot of people who only speak Spanish. And I think if we cannot get at least closed captioning up on YouTube in Spanish, that we are leaving an entire swath of my constituents out of the dialogue and the conversation. So I would like to request that we do something about that.
Thank you. We're going to skip Counselor Lindell and move to you, Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As well, just thank you, Councilor Faulkner, for mentioning the inaugural Santa Fe Disability Pride Parade that's happening on Saturday. It's 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. this Saturday. Parade starts off all the fun festivities. It'll wrap up around here, City Hall. I believe, Mayor, you're going to be issuing a proclamation, raising of the Pride Disability Pride flag. So everybody, please come out and have some fun. There will also be lots of fun activities on the plaza as well. As I've requested in the past, but I'm requesting now in the governing body session for the enterprise risk assessment to be presented to the governing body. I've had the opportunity to review the full report once. I've kind of trying to go over it a couple times because every time I go through it, I find something new. And I think it's a tool that will help us to build a better and stronger government. One of the issues that's in there is the lack of an emergency preparedness operations and procedures, and I'd begun to work with fire and PD and the city manager and Ryan Williams to begin to implement that. And I'm glad that was in that report, but I think there's much more in that report that we can utilize. I must say I am concerned by the results, but let's look at it from the glass is half full perspective, and we have an opportunity to strengthen our government based off these results. And then I as well would like to begin to request for accommodations for our Spanish-speaking community be available for whether it's folks that are in the room or available online. That's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And Counselor?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to echo what has already been said. I think that presentation of the risk assessment is essential because of the knowledge that's up here and the discussions and questions that we have the opportunity to ask about important items such as this is how we accomplish things. We know better how to work with staff. We know better how to work with one another to address issues. And I think that the public needs to know what are some of the concerns and actively see the leadership they elected invest in those concerns and making them better. So I think a presentation is essential. And I think sooner than later is also an important piece to that as well. I too think that accessibility is huge. Throughout my term, we've talked a lot about being transparent, honesty, those important things to our community. And we can't truly say that we're being those things if, you know, a large portion of our community can't participate and know how the city is being ran and supported by the leadership. So accessibility is huge. I feel like there are things that we can do, such as Spanish captions, at least, that is necessary in order for us to really be a city government that truly cares that our community is involved in the work that we're doing. And lastly, my godson and my nephew, and really what I consider like my first son, because we are incredibly close, turns 26 on July 14th, David Lee. Happy birthday. I love you, and I always will, unconditionally, no matter what, no matter how far, which is what I try to tell.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you all so much for your words. I do want to invite the community out to a community conversation that I am having on July 30th at 3:30 at the Convention Center. We're going to be looking into green spaces. Some folks will be there to represent dark skies. We want to talk about the future of how we live as a community here in Santa Fe. I want to also invite folks to the Pride Parade and the Livability series that's coming up. Also show my support for a presentation on the risk assessment. I think it's really important that we sort of understand where where we can do better and where we can have a little bit more growth, and that's wonderful because we always want to be better. And of course, I will always be an advocate for interpretation services at every meeting, at every city event. Part of my intention with the anti-bullying legislation and including language access was to make sure that we provide as best as we can in city buildings, everything in dual language as best to our ability. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lindell, we're just doing the matters from the governing body.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't have anything this evening.
Great. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of our members is now a Gran. Congratulations, Gran.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually forgot to say that. Peter and I became grandparents 2 weeks ago, Thursday. And a baby boy, Corbin William Worth, who has stolen our hearts, as you might imagine. So thank you for circling back on that because I forgot.
Okay, Gran. So that's a big deal, and it should not go without being applauded and sending our love. IFAM, everybody, is about to happen again. 20th anniversary, I believe. It's going to be bigger than ever. It's, I think, a kind of celebration that only can happen in Santa Fe because of the community we have of volunteers, the people who historically have been in the old days part of the Peace Corps, come home and want their country to be represented in a beautiful, beautiful festive occasion that also celebrates social entrepreneurship, doing good and doing well at the same time. The Disability Pride Parade has been mentioned. It's the first time any community in New Mexico has done this. And excuse me, as Councilor Garcia mentioned, we'll have a proclamation and a flag raising right here at City Hall. And a big shout out to our Disability Commission and the leadership there for helping making this happen. We couldn't have done it without their strength and their commitment. And another big event that's coming up tomorrow is a fire station renaming. I hope everybody can get there to acknowledge a great city servant, not only a fire chief, but a city manager who is very deserving of having a fire station named after him. So that's a great thing. I want to come to the risk assessment for just 1 minute because the public who are watching, listening, may or may not have a clear idea about what an internal audit does and what Moss Adams has given us as a tool. The word audit has been in our vocabulary over the last couple of years, meaning a financial audit. This is not a financial audit. This is a management audit. This is like the McHarg report. It's a you suggest an area where we can learn our we can go to school on ourselves and others and learn how to provide better processes, better policies, better effective service delivery by digging deep into an area. And the way you prioritize those areas is by asking leadership of the city, the city employees, department heads, where they think it's best to focus our energy and our attention. I went back and looked up the email that I originally got from Moss Adams staff people to describe the project. And I think it's worth just reading out loud the way they describe what the internal audit is all about. This is reading directly from their email. It says, the purpose of this risk assessment is to provide leadership with a way to measure uncertainty related to its functions and processes at a high level, and then guide the organization's future efforts to increase resilience. Moss Adams wants our participation. The goal of the interview is to discuss your experience and insights to help Moss Adams identify any areas of concern and to gain an understanding of opportunities for improvement you perceive to exist. So this is a self-improvement exercise where we take a hard look at areas where we need to do better. We know we can do better. We can be more resilient, as they said. we can be more efficient. We've done it over the last 6 years in a variety of areas, including an assessment of our police evidence room, our IT department, other areas where working through the audit committee, the opportunity was identified to provide improvements to the way we do business. And it's the way any good organization gets better. So I'm eager to embrace their recommendations and have the audit committee bring forward a recommendation about where to focus our energies in most importantly and most effectively in our next round of internal audit activities. So, Madam Clerk, that completes communications from the governing body. We're tiptoeing up to 7 o'clock, which would be the time for petitions from the floor. Can you take us to the next item on the agenda, please?
Yes, Mayor. The next item is item 16. It's introduction of legislation. Item 16A is consideration of a bill sponsored by Councilor Carol Romero Worth. It's a bill amending SFCC 1987, Section 11-8, to allow the city of Santa Fe to obtain an investment advisory service contractually for the investment of public funds.
Councilor Mayor-Worth.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So I don't have anything further to add. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, I think we're at 7 o'clock. Can we begin petitions from the floor?
Certainly, Mayor.
So anyone here in the room who wants to talk about a subject that is not related to the public hearings that we will be having later this evening, anything else is fair game for a 2-minute presentation to the governing body. And we'll start with anyone who comes up to the podium now, and then entertain those speakers here first, and then we'll go to the Zoom room. So if it's a public hearing, please wait for that hearing. If it's not, then you have the floor. And the clerk will keep the clock, and we'll try to be fair and equitable for everyone.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Jose Lorenzo Villegas Sr. I'm a resident of Santa Fe County. My home is located 2.8 miles downstream from the Municipal Airport, the DOD site, and the wastewater facility. I came with a prepared statement. I'm hoping that I can complete this within 2 minutes, but if you can allow me to complete my mission here, I'll be a happy camper.
Go.
Mr. Mayor. Fact, on November 14, 2023, I addressed the BCC, the Board of County Commission, that I had received notification that my private well was contaminated with high concentrations of PFAS chemical, AFFF firefighting foam. This firefighting foam is a fire suppressant used to extinguish flammable liquid fires such as fuel fires. In fact, I was directly advised by the county not to drink and or use the private well water for my family that is our primary source of safe drinking water and domestic and agricultural uses, and to locate an alternative safe drinking water source. In fact, the primary source of PFAS contamination of our groundwater aquifer was a DOD Army National Guard aviation support facility that is located at the city municipal airport property, including the potential PFAS contamination of our primary groundwater aquifer being generated by a dysfunctional wastewater treatment facility that sits adjacently to the DOD and municipal airport boundaries. In fact, the failure of the DOD, the New Mexico National Guard, including the city of Santa Fe and the New Mexico Environment Department, to appropriately inform and notify a traditional and historical community of La Cienega land grant, which is located approximately 2.8 miles downstream from these governmental facilities, is deplorable and irresponsible in all magnitudes. In fact, to this day, I have not heard any of the above governmental agencies to alert my community by declaring a public health advisory order to safeguard our families from these dangerous chemical compounds, which has compromised our primary safe drinking water resources. In fact, Now, let me bring you up to update. Not a single word and or of a positive government intervention or mitigation action has been initiated by the governing body of Santa Fe, especially the state of New Mexico Environment Department, Department of Homeland Security, EPA, DOD, to address a declaration of an emergency for this high minority population and low-income population outside of the city limits. Fact, lastly, on June 15th, Father's Day, the dysfunctional operations of the wastewater treatment facility were caught red-handed, illegally discharging human waste into the Santa Fe River, which leads directly 2.8 miles downstream where my family, my neighbors, and even the beavers reside. I'm the one that caught it. I'm the one that saw it with my own eyes, videotaped it, recorded it, reported to EPA, did everything I'm supposed to do. I did just that.
I'm
In
gonna
conclusion-
have to ask you to wrap it up as quickly as you can, please.
In conclusion, is this where the actual definition of microaggression term sits in today's world of scenarios of what a municipality like the city of Santa Fe is conducting against an indigenous community, which is my community as we speak? If it is, then the governing body of the Santa Fe needs to cease and desist this type of microaggression tactics against an historical and traditional community today, tomorrow, and the next. I'm not a happy camper bear. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. No, please, we don't applaud, we don't boo. Everybody gets the same respect. Thank you. Yes, you have the floor.
Mr. Mayor and City Councilors, my name is Judith Gabriel and I live in District 2. I won't be here for the public hearing later, and I wish to speak right now about the median ordinance that's coming up later on the agenda. I'm a volunteer with the Street Homeless Animal Project. I'm opposed to the proposed ordinance regulating the use of medians that will be voted on later this evening, too late for most of us to stay for, and which doesn't appear to be about pedestrian safety, but rather an attempt to remove homeless individuals from our streets so residents and tourists don't have to see them or deal with them. This sentiment was confirmed in the Santa Fe New Mexican's first article about the proposed ordinance, when Santa Fe's tourism director was quoted as saying, "Although most people come from places where homeless people also have a presence, they want to leave that behind when they go away. And if there's something that could be done, that would help keep them out of the historic district." Santa Fe characterizes itself as an inclusive community, but until we ensure the well-being of all Santa Feans, we can hardly make this claim. I'm all for safety, meaningful policy development, and real solutions, and I'm not convinced that this ordinance is about any of those things. The city hasn't shared any data demonstrating that people in medians are causing or experiencing injuries or deaths. We do hear about pedestrians crossing busy streets outside of crosswalks and getting injured or killed. Are we doing anything to address this? As for homelessness, the recent HomeWise-sponsored Livability Speaker Series discussed a lack of affordable housing as an important cause of homelessness. One thing the city could do to provide more affordable housing is to require all developers to provide a certain percentage of affordable housing and eliminate the option of paying a fee in lieu of actually building the affordable housing we need. We can and should address homelessness in a more meaningful and compassionate manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Benenato. I want to thank the city council for asking to discuss, excuse me, the risk assessment that we've been reading about in the paper. I do understand that it's not an audit, a financial audit, but I do think it's important that people and the city understand what that really means and what's really happening with that, because it does actually play into the audit itself. I also have to say that it's really disappointing to me that the city can't even keep 3 pools open. When the outdoor pool opens, which I think is this week, Perez will close at 1:30, so the outdoor pool can open, and there will only be 1 hour of lap swimming in 3 lanes at the outdoor pool, whereas there was lap swimming pretty much all afternoon at Perez. So it is a shortening up of opportunity. I'm happy the outdoor pool will open. But it seems that if you have 30 people as lifeguard supervisors, that you should have enough to run 3 pools. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Catherine Rivera. I'm a resident of District 1. I too am not able to stay for the actual hearing on this matter, so I wanted to speak about it now. When I was last here, I shared this picture with you, and I wanted to share that, in my opinion, 2 main points are still relevant. One is safety. Narrow medians are not safe spaces for persons or businesses. The safety hazards are the highest here, and there are increased risks to drivers. As a driver, I personally was distracted by 2 interesting things on Cerrillos Road in St. Francis, and I was not alone. One person in the median had a very huge skull mask on, and the person was not necessarily even panhandling. And the second one was a person asking for money for a funeral again. I will tell you that if you're still looking for numbers, in one example, I can give you 3. There have been 3 documented pedestrian fatalities in the past 8 years at this same intersection. Don't know the status of the individuals. I'm not saying they were panhandling, but they were in the median, and it was a fatal accidents. In my opinion, it's hard to defend keeping this as our status quo. The second thing that I think is still relevant is the humanity. How is Santa Fe going about promoting dignity and respect? Are we concerned about the welfare of these people in the middle of the medians? And what are we doing to protect them? I think Santa Fe can send a message that we are not turning a blind eye to putting people in vulnerable positions and even human trafficking activity that's happening in this city. A few weeks ago, you all passed a local legislation establishing safe spaces in this city, and it showed your commitment to the safety of marginalized communities. The rationale for that and for this ordinance is safe spaces. If you support safe spaces, in my opinion, you should support keeping our narrow medians clear for all reasons of public safety. I'm encouraging you to pass this ordinance, saying yes to safety, saying yes to reducing pedestrian fatalities and accidents, saying yes to protecting human dignity, and saying no to exploitation and human trafficking of the most vulnerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? I really would like it if we could. I'm sorry you won't be able to stay with us, and we're giving a little latitude tonight, people wanting to make a statement about what will be a public hearing. But if there's something that's not a public hearing and you're here to speak to it, please do it now. Or Madam Clerk, if there's somebody on the Zoom who would like to talk about anything other than the public hearings tonight.
Yes, Mayor, there are 2 attendees with their hands raised. We'll start with Brittany Rodriguez.
Good evening, governing body. I just want to quickly make a comment to add to the accessibility as mentioned by many of you. Public comment and public hearing being one of the last items on the agenda makes participation inaccessible for many members of the community, especially those who are unhoused and have to rely on public transportation and meet shelter curfews, meaning that those who will be impacted by decisions that will be discussed during public hearing are unable to participate in conversation on measures that will directly impact their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's another hand up in the Zoom room, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mayor. Nikhil.
Hi, my name's Nikhil. I'm a Santa Fe resident and a resident of District, I believe District 2. I'd like to speak today in favor of the resolution that's poised to be heard at the end of this month on income discrimination in by landlords in the city. I think this is a very important priority for the city. I think that it's a very common sense thing to implement, right? These are, there's people in the state of New Mexico who currently have been facing eviction and discrimination just on the basis that they're receiving their income from public assistance, right? Now, in my opinion, if you can pay the terms of your rent, and by all means, it qualifies under all the requirements for that assistance, it is completely unreasonable for a landlord to discriminate against these types of tenants. I think it's just ultimately a proxy for other forms of discrimination that are already prohibited, but ultimately, I urge the city council to pass this ordinance and pass it and follow up that passage with real enforcement mechanisms so that landlords aren't able to avoid the law through loopholes or through lack of mechanisms in place in the state of New Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the Zoom room, Madam Clerk?
No, Mayor.
Very good. And anyone else, last chance, anyone in the room tonight who wants to speak to something that's not a public hearing, now would be the time to do it. In that case, Madam Clerk, can you take us to the next item that we have moved up on the agenda?
Yes, Mayor. Next item is 18. It's a public comment on bills. This is the first public comment.
I think we switched
No
our
action.
order of business to take the
Oh.
land use case up.
My apologies, Mayor. Yes, the next item is then item 20A. It's a public hearing. This is a land use case. It's appeal number 2024-8077 of case number 2023-7620. Appellant Stephanie Benenato appeals the Board of Adjustment's decision to grant a setback variance on a property located at 1030.5 West Houghton Street. And we have Assistant City Attorney Rebecca McCurman for questions.
Great. Let me run over the process for anyone who is not familiar with it. I'll begin by asking any members of the governing body if anyone has had any ex parte communications that would lead them to recuse themselves from this hearing if they cannot be fair and impartial. Then we'll move to the staff report, go to the appellant, making an opening statement and introducing evidence through sworn testimony. The applicant has the same opportunity, make an opening statement and introduce testimony, followed by the opportunity for cross-examination by the applicant and by the appellant, and the ability to ask questions of staff. All of this we're hoping will be done in an expeditious manner, followed by public comment, sworn public comment. After that, the governing body has the opportunity to ask questions of staff, of the parties, or of any witnesses who have participated, including the general public. At the end of the public hearing portion, we'll go to the opportunity for and the questions by the governing body, closing arguments, and then I'll entertain a motion after closing the public hearing formally, and then discussion and a vote. So let's take it in order. Is there anyone here who cannot be fair and impartial in this matter? Very good. In that case, let's begin with the staff report presentation by either land use or the city attorney's office, whoever's going to lead us through this.
Mayor, members of the governing body. Thank you. I'm Heather Lamboy, interim land use director, and Rebecca McCurman is on her way. Just contacted her. I can provide general overview as to the site and the process if you wish. So this particular case required both a variance, but has also been to the Historic Districts Review Board. So Rebecca will be presenting information from both of those hearings, but the focus of the discussion this evening is with reference to the appeal of the variance request. There are two properties on the lot, two houses actually on two different lots, but they are very small lots and they are both historic homes, and the applicant is seeking to make some changes to one of the homes and has requested this variance. I will defer to
Very good.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body. Apologize, I was a little bit late. I was watching on YouTube. I think there was a little bit of a delay. It looked like it was still wrapping up. But I do have a PowerPoint presentation for you all regarding the appeal that we're going to be hearing tonight. So if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to pull it up.
We need some IT support.
I need some IT support. Yes. Thank you.
Here's constituent services masquerading as IT support. All right, can everybody see the screen? Nope, it was there and then it's gone.
Thank you all for your patience. I think we're ready to go now. So tonight we're going to be hearing a land use appeal. This is case number 2024-8077. It is an appeal of a setback variance on a property located at 1030.5 West Houghton Street. My name is Rebecca Minuk Herman. I know you all know me, but for those of you in the audience, I may not have met yet. I'm one of the assistant city attorneys with the city attorney's office. So there are two parties to the appeal. The appellant in this case is Ms. Stephanie Beninato. She is a neighbor who lives near the subject property. And the appellee in this case is Francesca Banchi. She was the applicant for a variance, and as I understand it, I believe she's going to be represented through her attorney, Stephen Domas, tonight. The decision that is being appealed is a Board of Adjustment decision that was rendered on February 6th of this year, during which the Board of Adjustment voted to approve a setback variance for the property, which allows construction up to a property line. So a variance is a deviation from the restrictions in the Land Development Code, which I'll be referring to mostly as the code or the city code tonight. Variances can be granted for sections in certain circumstances, including code sections regulating size, location, or appearance of structures, location and extent of open space, the extent of grading on a property, the width and configuration of public and private roads, driveways, and trails, and to similar standards for development established by Chapter 14. The ability to grant variances is not without limitation. The idea is that they are only granted in certain limited circumstances and when certain criteria apply. The rule for variances does specifically state that variances shall not be granted in situations where someone is seeking a deviation from a city code restriction on use. So for example, if you were zoned residential and you wanted a non-permitted use in that area, you could not do that through a variance. You'd have to do that through a rezoning. So variances are not available for use restrictions. They are also not permitted for city code restrictions on intensity, which our code defines as extent of development, including limits on maximum residential density. So again, if you were in an R5 district and that's what you were zoned for, you could not request a variance for R7. And no variance shall be granted to any procedural rule. So if something has to be done by a particular time, you can't request a variance from the code for those types of procedural rules. The code does set out very specific criteria for granting a variance. That criteria is laid out in Code Section 14-3.16. In general, the purpose of this section of the code is to limit variances to situations where there is something inherent to the property or structure outside of the applicant's control that prohibits the applicant from making reasonable use of the property in compliance with the city code. So the intention is that we don't want to put applicants in a position or residents of the city in a position where they have something happening with their property that they cannot work around. So if the code says you can only build on less than 30% grade and every inch of your property is 40% grade, that would be certainly a situation where the code would be basically depriving you of reasonable use of your property if you strictly followed the code. So we have this ability to grant variances in certain circumstances where there is some kind of physical characteristic in the property that prohibits the landowner from being able to develop that property in conformity with the code. I've prepared a decision tree here that kind of outlines the process for how we do this analysis. I did want to note I made a slight update from the decision tree that I provided in the staff report that was available to you all on PrimeGov. So Section 1 provides, the first question that we ask is if there are unusual physical characteristics that exist that distinguish the land or structure from others in the vicinity that are subject to the same relevant provisions of Chapter 14. That's going to be the first question that we're looking at. Like, what are those unusual physical characteristics about the structure or lot? The second question is going to be, do those unusual physical characteristics make it infeasible for reasons other than financial cost to develop the property in compliance with the standards of Chapter 14? And so this is the section that I clarified somewhat in this decision tree that's slightly different from the staff report. Staff report asks, do the special circumstances make it infeasible? That's the direct language from the code, but the special circumstances are referring to those unusual physical characteristics. So we're not looking at other special circumstances. The code doesn't leave special circumstances up to interpretation. Those special circumstances need to be those physical characteristics that you identified in criterion 1. And then criterion 3 asks, does the intensity of development not exceed that which is allowed on other properties in the vicinity that are subject to the same relevant provisions of Chapter 14? Subsection 4 asks, or criterion 4 asks, is the variance the minimum variance that will make it make possible the reasonable use of the land or structure? And finally, after considering all of those factors, the decider also has to consider whether the variance is not contrary to the public interest. So even if you have a variance that's requested that would meet all of those other criteria, if you determine that it is not in the public interest to grant that variance, then that would be a reason to deny the variance. So the material that the governing body is to consider tonight is the appeal petition and all attachments. The findings and conclusions by the Board of Adjustment, which I'll often be referring to as the BOA, the minutes and transcripts of the BOA hearing, the staff report, other submittals by the appellant and appellee. So there were a number of written submittals by both parties that were also included in the governing body's packet tonight. Any testimony that you receive during the appeal hearing. So the parties will have an opportunity to introduce testimony. And also the governing body will have an opportunity to elicit testimony from staff or from anyone else that they'd like to ask questions of this evening. Also, you may consider documentary evidence that you receive at the appeal hearing. So documentary evidence is permitted to be introduced at the hearing tonight, and any opening and closing statements from the parties or their representatives. So a little bit of information about the property itself. This is 1030 and a half West Houghton. So you can see in the red box in that image on the left, that's the property that we're going to be discussing tonight. So this is the view from the street. And then the image on the right is a street view of the property. And so you can see that 1030 and a half West Houghton is kind of this long back property kind of in the middle of that lot there. It's a landlocked property, and it's kind of behind these other two these other two structures here. You can see 1030 is the property in the front. And here's a couple more pictures of the property, just close up so you can see what it looks like. This is this is 1030 and a half West Houghton. So the code section from which the variance is sought is City Code Section 14-7.2, Table of Dimension Standards. Note 12 in that code section provides that street yard requirements apply to lot access driveways. Because in this circumstance, the property does not have street frontage, the area at issue is treated as a street yard. So 0 lot line affidavits are not available on street yards, only side and rear yards. So the main questions that we're going to be considering tonight are 3 of the criteria, namely whether there is evidence in the record that shows that there are special circumstances related to physical characteristics of the property that make it infeasible to develop the property in conformity with the code for reasons other than financial cost. Another question is whether the variance is the minimum possible variance that will make reasonable use of the land or structure. And 3, whether granting the variance would be not contrary to the public interest. So these are the 3 criteria that are currently in dispute among the parties. So the first question, whether the evidence in the record shows that there are special circumstances related to physical characteristics of the property that make it infeasible to develop the property in conformity with the code for reasons other than financial cost. The applicant stated that here the property is only 24.24 feet deep. And actually, let me back up just a moment because I think I want to make clear that as to criterion 1 and the special circumstances, there does not appear to be any dispute among staff or either of the parties that there are special circumstances here. There are unusual physical characteristics, namely that this property is landlocked and that it's an extremely small lot. So that's why I'm not going to be going into depth in my presentation about the special circumstances. The parties may have additional information that they'd like to give the governing body tonight about that specific factor, but I'm not going to be going into it in great detail in my presentation. So going back to this section, the applicant's position is that the property is that they cannot develop it, and the reason that they give in their application was, quote, the property is only 24.24 feet deep where the addition is proposed. With the required front yard, side yard, and rear yard setbacks, the addition would only be 13 feet from front to back, which would restrict development of a bedroom suite that could be modified in the future for accessibility of the owner who plans to live in the dwelling and is planning the addition to enable her to age in place at home. That was the applicant's statement in their application. Staff had a different position from the applicant. Staff's position was that the proposed development could be reconfigured to use the available space within the setbacks and achieve the same square footage and accessibility desired by the applicant and be in compliance with Chapter 14. So staff is taking the position that a variance is not needed in order to make it feasible to develop the property, in order for it to be used as a residence. The applicant, or the appellant in this case, Ms. Beninato, also took a position on this criteria in her statement. She noted that the code does not, quote, "the code does not state that the possible future use of the interior space is grounds for granting a variance." And she also argued that the fact that the owner alleges she wants to age in place with a caretaker and needs to add on is irrelevant to the zoning question. And so that was the appellant's statement about criterion 1. Or about, this is actually criterion 2, but about the first item that's actually in dispute, which is criterion 2. So the second question is whether the variance is the minimum possible variance that will make reasonable use of the land or structure. The code does provide a couple of factors that are to be considered in making this determination. Subsection A asks whether the property has been or could be used without variances for a different category or lesser intensity of use, and consistency with the purpose and intent of Chapter 14, with the purpose and intent of the articles and sections from which the variance is granted, and with the applicable goals and policies of the general plan. The applicants was, so essentially in this case, based on my review of the record, my understanding is that the applicant in this case, or the appellee, took the position that the criterion is met because the variance would still allow for residential use. And they stated that the approval of the variance will achieve the same purpose and intent of a zero lot line affidavit consistent with the provisions of Chapter 14 and will facilitate continued use of the property for one single family dwelling consistent with the general plan. Staff disagreed that it met the criteria and stated that the property can be used as a residential dwelling as is, or with a different design of the addition. The proposed variance is not the only option for the renovation of the property. So staff did not believe that the variance that was requested was the minimum possible variance to make reasonable use of the land or structure. And finally, the last item that's in dispute is whether the variance is not contrary to the public interest. The applicant in this case stated that approval of the variance would benefit the public in several ways. The applicant stated that the existing nonconformities with respect to private open space and for the north setback will be resolved. Intensity of land will be lessened as the existing 975 square foot dwelling will be transformed into an 897 square foot building. The applicant further stated that the modifications will also resolve the existing encroachments onto the front property. And finally, they stated the variance will facilitate transformation of a marginal dwelling unit with 6 foot 2 inch ceilings into a modern livable dwelling that will meet the owner's needs and enhance the neighborhood. The staff took the position that the governing body has implemented the general plan and related ordinances in order to establish minimum standards for health, safety, and welfare affecting land uses and developments as a means to protect the public interest. While a residential unit is generally a use consistent with the area, the development as proposed is in violation of Chapter 14 and therefore not in the public interest. The appellant had some information, took a position on this as well in her material. Appellant noted that it is a health and public safety concern that could affect my physical well-being and result in damage to my home, which is my biggest asset. She further stated, I have been speaking out about this problem of overcrowding and fire danger for over 5 years now. I'm afraid District 2 is the next Maui when there is a catastrophic fire. With the record in mind and the statements by the parties, the governing body is going to have 3 motion options tonight. These are some sample motions. You could reverse, affirm, or modify the Board of Adjustment's decision. This is going to be a de novo hearing, so you're going to be hearing both looking at the record from the Board of Adjustment and also hearing some new evidence tonight. if you were to move to reverse the Board of Adjustment decision, you would move to grant the appeal, reverse the BOA's decision to grant the variance, and direct staff to create new findings of fact and conclusions of law. Motion option 2 is the governing body could move to, a member could move to affirm the Board of Adjustment decision. I think I have to note that at this point, I don't think that the record is quite developed enough to affirm the Board of Adjustment's decision. And specifically, I think that is because the unusual physical characteristics in this case, I think the evidence shows that there are unusual physical characteristics, but that there is not adequate evidence to show that it is infeasible to develop this property in conformity with the code as a residence. Additionally, I think that at this point, there is probably not evidence to show that this is the minimum possible variance that would be needed to continue to use this property as a variance. The evidence does seem to indicate that there's already a residence existing on the property. A residence of the same size could continue to exist on the property even if it were renovated. And so at this point, I don't think that there is adequate evidence to find that a variance is needed to continue to use this property as a residence. However, you are going to be hearing new evidence and testimony tonight. You're going to have an opportunity to ask questions of the parties and any witnesses in this case. And so if you reach the conclusion that based on that evidence, there is adequate evidence to meet all of the criteria for granting a variance, then the governing body may affirm the variance. And the third option is to modify the variance or to modify the Board of Adjustment's decision. And essentially what that would mean is that you'd be denying the appeal and granting the variance, agreeing with the Board of Adjustment, but on different grounds than the Board of Adjustment found. And so that concludes my presentation for this evening. I'll be around for questions when the time comes to ask questions of staff, should the governing body have any for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go now to the appellant, who is available to make an opening statement and introduce evidence through sworn testimony. And if we can do this in about 15 minutes, which is what the city attorney's office provided, I think that would be great.
I'm not sure what, excuse me, I'm not sure what you mean by sworn testimony. Do I ask Mr. Sears questions under oath now, or do I do that later?
Well, no, you get to make your presentation.
Okay, I actually need to get my glasses. I'm sorry.
Take your time. And Madam Clerk, I think we're swearing people in at this point. So that's part of the sworn testimony piece.
All right, Ms. Benato, if you'd please raise your right hand and state your name and your address.
Stephanie Benato, P.O. Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I'm here today because I find that the Board of Adjustment is not following its own standards, and that it has created a fire hazard by granting this variance. And I found that the Board of Adjustment did not discuss any of the things that are found in your findings of facts and conclusions of law. I am actually wanting to bring up the 35-day rule in which the appeal becomes final if there's no adoption of findings of facts and conclusions of law. We had this discussion, or it was brought up in another appeal about a year ago. I have to say that the Board of Adjustment, excuse me, I have really bad allergies. The Board of Adjustment is still not on YouTube, still not on Zoom. So there's no recording of the meeting. So it's not accessible at all unless you show up at the meeting. I had to drop this appeal before the findings of facts were adopted. And so I find them to be outside the scope of this appeal because I can't change the grounds after the date of the filing of the appeal is done. The other thing is that we were told last year that we could rely on the minutes. The minutes were also not available before this appeal had to be filed. There is no such thing as interim minutes in the appeal ordinance. And the minutes, I love the minutes because the minutes, excuse me. Let me have a minute here. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's what the minutes actually say. Board action, motion. In case 2023-7620, 1030 and a half West Houghton setback variance. Member Deering moved to approve the setback variance, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections that may be imposed by staff. The motion was seconded by Member Alexander. Member Deering said this was a creative solution. Member Painter said some of the criteria were not met. He says it's an unfortunate situation. He had no idea what the properties were originally used for, and then they give the vote. Now, how would you know what standard the Board of Adjustment used? What is the creative solution that they're referring to? This is the minutes that we're supposed to be using to go to appeal. Your appeal ordinance says that things need to be in writing. This is the only part of the appeal ordinance that is different. I'm asking today that you direct the city attorney within 60 days to come up with some solution for this 35-day rule that requires the board or the council to take action to adopt the findings, not to make it a final decision and put the burden on the person who might want to appeal. Secondly, I think this is really backwards because if we do look at what Ms. Deering said, excuse me. Sorry, I'm very nervous. If we look at what Ms. Deering said about this whole thing, she says, yes, I just wanted to, and I should have said it before I made the motion, but I just think this is really a creative solution that solves a lot of problems and makes the property usable that otherwise would practically not be. That's actually not the standard that she's supposed to be using. And then she says, and they're still going to be held fire to the foot or foot to the fire by the H board. Let's not kid ourselves. The H boards, there's going to be a lot of hoops to jump through beyond this board. I think the solution they've come up with is quite creative. I think the addition of the arbor space, the demolition of the shed, if the H board will let them do it, is going to improve the property. The problem is that the H board's hand is being tied if you grant this variance tonight. Maybe you should just put this table it and actually send it to the H board, because this has not been given a status. If it becomes a contributing building, it's a whole new different set of criteria that is, or not totally new, but there's other criteria that is used if it's a contributing building. If it's a contributing building and they find that the primary facade is the part that you see from the street, you can't destroy it, then the demolition will not be allowed. I really feel that this is backwards, that the H board should have been given the right to make these decisions before this went to variance, because it is totally dependent on what the H board decides. But you've again pushed, this is pushing them into a corner And again, I think your fourth possibility here is to table this and send it to the H board, and it might solve all the problems concerning variances anyway. And they didn't even try to get variances from the neighbors. You have in your packet, it's the appellate, it's attachment A from the appellant. No, not me, the appellee, excuse me. It's the BOA packet. And in there, the last page is from the Diane Jennings, who is at 1015 Don Cubero, the back line on the property. In her letter, she says that Miss Bonci approached her less than 24 hours before the BOA hearing, asking if she would agree to a setback, where she would not develop her property, and that Bonci could go to 0 lot line. And I want to explain something. When you say something's at 0 lot line, you actually mean that the building is within the setback. So it could be really at the boundary, but if it's a setback of 5 feet and you're 4 feet from the boundary, you're non-conforming and you're 0 lot line. Okay, just to be clear about land use terms. And again, Miss Jennings tells us that this happened the night before the hearing. Mr. Sears said that they're relying on the variance, and if they don't get the variance, then they'll have to talk to the neighbors. So apparently they haven't bothered to talk to the neighbors at all, except for going around with form letters to get people to say, gee, we don't mind, where our lot's crowded, you can crowd your lot too. And then the other problem I think with this is that, and nobody's discussed, there are actually 2 problems. And if you go to Exhibit 3 of mine, you will see that there is a chart there that the city uses for maximum lot coverage. And the normal lot coverage for an R5 zone is 40% of the lot line, 40% of the lot coverage. So the city has determined that what is reasonable is 40% of the lot coverage. This is less than a 2,000 square foot lot. It's actually 1,949 square feet. That means it can have a 780 square foot building at 40% lot coverage. I myself have a casita that's a 1-bedroom, 780 square foot structure that's quite spacious. And it can easily be done within the existing footprint even, because the existing footprint, if you took away the covered porch, you would have basically 40% lot coverage. The other thing that hasn't been discussed here, and it's in this chart, it says here that 2,000 feet is, so 4,000 square feet is the minimum size of a lot. Miss Monchi's front house is less than 4,000 square feet, and this lot is less than 2,000 square feet. And when it's less than 2,000 square feet, you're supposed to have common open space, which requires, I believe it's a 12-foot dimension and 30% of the structure's square footage. So in this case, we'll just say it's about 240 square feet. That is 30% of 800, which is 40% of 2,000. So they have to have common open space. And if they want to add on to get to 50%, they have to have private open space, which is a different dimension and a different percentage of the structure's square footage determines the square footage of the private open space. So that's never even been discussed by the Board of Adjustment. And I think it's imperative that it is discussed, because I think it limits the lot's development to 40% because they have to have the common open space. And I believe where the sheds were, where the common shed was, that was used as common open space at some point in time. The other thing that has never been discussed here, even though I have brought it up, and that makes this whole decision arbitrary, capricious, and whatever else you might say about it, fraudulent perhaps. We've not discussed that in the note 5, which is about the setback that the neighbor can agree to, and it does say it's side to side and back to backyards. I don't really have a problem that the Board of Adjustment wanted to allow this kind of agreement. I do not agree that this is a landlocked property. It has access on a driveway. It has vehicular parking, and it has pedestrian access. There are many, many lots in South Capitol that have similar setup. I lived at 604.5 Galisteo, same setup. 610A Galisteo, same setup. 718 Don Gaspar, same setup. 1028 West Houghton, 1028.5 West Houghton, the next property, they share a driveway. I'm not sure what the legal ownership is on the driveway. So it's not unusual circumstances. The only circumstance that's unusual here is that it's a non-conforming lot. That's the only unusual circumstance. And the problem is that if you want your neighbor to grant you this setback, the neighbor has to agree, it has to have enough room for their own setback and your setback. And they have to agree never to develop that property, that part of the property. We've never talked about what is the separation between the house on the front lot and where the lot line is, because it's measured from the lot line. And I have looked at this, and we can have Mr. Sayers or maybe your staff testify, but I believe, and I believe that Mr. Carnes talked about this, that there's only 10 feet. 10 feet is necessary for the backyard setback. There needs to be another 7 feet for the front yard setback on the back house. So in other words, from the lot line to the house on the front lot, there has to be 17 feet. There is not 17 feet, it's 10 feet. So you're being asked to give a variance so that we can supposedly have somebody who wants to age in place and has to have a bathroom and a closet. That's what's the purpose of the variance. It's in the record. Mr. Sears has said that. We have a plan that doesn't get rid of the nonconformity. And on page 4142, the BOA knew that. They said, even if you do what you want to do, this property is still not going to be conforming because the east side is in the setback. And Mr. Sears said, you're correct. So there's no way to correct that unless you knock the whole building down. And again, we don't have the setback. We don't have the separation. This is a safety and health issue. There's a reason for these setbacks when you have two different owners. If the owner wants to merge the properties, the 10-foot setback is fine because then it's an accessory dwelling unit and a main house, and it's 10 feet when it's one property. When it's two property, the city has decided more room is needed for health and safety. And just because there's a bunch of buildings in, I'm sorry, I don't have any way to blow this up, but at 1013 Don Cubero, for example, which is not really bordering this property, but close, they have a garage that's at 0 at back lot line, side lot line. They are about a foot from 1028.5, which is next to 1030.5. They have a building on the lot line. They are also pretty close to 1028. And then 1013 Don Cubero has besides the garage, they have some kind of carport that's basically touching both the house and the garage. I'm just mentioning these kinds of things. And if you look at the aerial view, which is in one of your packets, you can see there's a lot of trees. It's really a fire hazard. I really believe that South Capitol is the Maui of Santa Fe. That if we have a catastrophic fire, this area will go up. We have such overgrown alleys. We have people building up to the alley without permits, with permits, who cares? It's been going on, and it's not in the public interest to increase this. And it's not in the public interest to say, gee, it's okay. It's okay because everybody else does it. We should have more space because it's the smallest building in the area. Well, yeah, it's also the smallest lot, and the size of the building is determined by the lot size. So if you pick a small lot, you are challenged and you are confined. And again, you can build a 780 square foot residence without needing a variance. It's 40% of the lot coverage. The city has determined that 40% of the lot coverage is reasonable use. 50 is a plus. And so I'm asking that you actually send this to the H board, but if not, I'm asking that you deny the variance because it doesn't meet all it doesn't cure all the problems. It creates another nonconformity that's even closer to the front house. And if you look at the plans, the one that was up on Ms. Minnock Herman's screen, which is page 6 of the application, you will see that the arbor itself is also non-conforming and needs a variance. This is a proposed new structure that they want to bring up to the lot line. And why? That's just creating yet another non-conformity and actually needs a variance that was never sought. I do have, I believe,
Ms.
Ms.
Beninata, you're past the 15-minute mark. Could you wrap it up, please?
Sure. Yeah, I want to, I believe that Ms. Porosky might be on Zoom and wants to make a statement. If not, I'd like to read her statement into the record.
Well, I think,
I could have testimony, right? So,
yeah, you can introduce evidence through sworn testimony.
okay. Is she on Zoom? Yeah.
Ms. Pravosky? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you please, do you have the ability to turn your camera on?
Oh, yes. Hold. I'm sorry. I just got a new laptop, so I'm figuring it out. So yeah, I will do that. Sorry, and it's storming out here, so I'm gonna
I just need to swear you in. If you could please raise your right hand and state your name and address.
yes, I'm trying to get let's see, where's my show captions. I'm working on this new computer. Can I do it without my
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Yes, I'm raising my right hand.
Please state your name and your address.
My name is Monica Prirovsky. I reside and I own the property at 1004 Don Cubero Avenue, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess I try to mind my own business. And not get into other people's business, but I really feel like on this street, I can't even walk my dog on the street because there's no sidewalk, there's no I take my dog off to somebody else's driveway and bring him back out to walk. It just feels like a very condensed area, and I don't think adding more square footage or adding a second bedroom or doing whatever they're going to do is helpful for the community. It's a very dense area, and there are lots of properties in South Capitol that, you know, there's space. And so it bothers me, I guess, that we have city codes, and the city codes say what we can do and what we can't do. And I really appreciate all of you listening to me. But I don't know. I'm kind of fearful of, like, I'm 1 block away, and if there was a fire or if there was a something, because people don't make their houses out of block anymore, they're just wood. That it could travel over to my side. So I think the city has an idea about making things right, not making things sort of right. I want them to make them right. And so I feel very strongly that, like, you could develop that particular property just as it is, like, just with the structure that it is. It could be very beautiful, but it won't be a 2 bedroom, it'll be 1 bedroom. And I think when I was at the Board of Adjustments meeting several months ago, one of the persons said, yeah, you just want to sell it off, you know, because you're going to sell off a 2 bedroom more than you can sell off a 1 bedroom. And I think that's true. So, so finally, what I would say is that, you know, I that is such a condensed area. Like, my street is not condensed. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parking spots that I could park cars on. And on that street, I can't even walk on a sidewalk. There's no sidewalks. It's so dense. It's so dense. And so making it more dense by adding an extra bedroom or making it bigger or whatever the lot line is or whatever, you know, that's beyond my understanding. But it doesn't make sense to me to do that. So I'm asking you all to kind of consider that it's not like some of the South Capitol properties are like half acres or half, they're big lots, and you could put things in there. But on that street is so dense. Like I said, there's no sidewalks. I have to walk away with my dog just to let a car pass. It's very dense. And I don't see why adding density to that area would be helpful.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your testimony. I think Ms. Benenato's time is elapsed, and we're going to have to go to the next phase of our hearing. But thank you for weighing in, and there'll be an opportunity for cross-examination in the future.
Thank you.
Very good. It's time for the applicant. You'll have an opportunity for an opening statement and sworn testimony, and you'll have an equal amount of time as Ms. Benenato.
Are you going to provide evidence, sir?
I'm gonna, my opening statement contains evidence, and the architect, Mr. Saris, is here for any direct questions that might be asked of him, and he can be sworn in at that moment. Is that okay, or does he?
I think it just depends if you're going to give any evidence that's not included in your statement by your sworn testimony with your witnesses.
Not much of it has changed, frankly, but I mean, I think there are some new things.
Why don't we go ahead and
we have to
swear
address there.
everybody in just for the being consistent here? If we could do that, please.
If you'll please raise your right hand, state your name and your address, please.
Stephen Domas, 623 Alto Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and city councilors. If I may address just the witness that was just on the Zoom there quickly. Her concerns of increasing the density, that the structure is actually it's going to be lowered in square footage. It's not on the street. It's behind the front house. It has off-street parking. Her concerns of density and parking and making the house bigger when in fact the house is going to be decreased in size. I just wanted to point that out quickly. We stand before you today to respectfully ask the governing body to deny the appeal before you and uphold the nearly unanimous decision made by the Board of Adjustment to approve the appellee's application for a 0 lot line variance at 1030 and a half West Houghton. Houghton. Cases like this are exactly why the Board of Adjustment exists and this forum for and what we're doing here. While staff are generally compelled to adhere strictly to the code when evaluating a variance application, the Board of Adjustment, as well as this body, are free to balance the intent of the code with the unique conditions of a property and then apply reasonable, rational judgment in deciding whether to approve a variance application. In this case, the Board of Adjustment found that the special circumstances of the property clearly justify approval of the appellee's application. After listening to extensive testimony, including Ms. Benedato's, and asking a lot of tough questions of my client and her architect, the BOA decided that 1030 and a half West Houghton meets all 5 of the criteria necessary to approve the variance. The property has unusual physical characteristics. The lot is very small, extremely narrow, landlocked on all 4 sides, and does not front the street. That's very important that it's not on the street. It's behind, it's 50 feet away from the street. Special circumstances, including no option to extend the footprint in any other direction, make it infeasible to develop the property in compliance with the code. The intensity of development does not exceed that of the others in the area. This is the minimum necessary variance required to enable reasonable use of the property, and the variance is not contrary to the public interest. The appellee and her architect, Mr. Saris, worked directly with Jason Cluck and the land use staff to develop this renovation plan. The result of their effort is a design that reduces total lot coverage to less than 50%, cures 3 existing nonconformities, increases the distance between the home and its neighbors, and creates a spacious private open space, which will be the only part of the property that is actually visible from the street. At the BOA hearing, Member Alexander praised the plan, saying this solution is going to improve the property exponentially and open it up as opposed to closing it in. I think it's a great design. We do too. I will first address why we believe and the BOE determined that Ms. Bonchi's variance meets all 5 of the criteria for approval. Then I will respond to each of Ms. Benedato's appeal issues. As the city attorney states in her report to this body, the only real issue on appeal is whether the variance meets the 5 city code criteria. Staff and the BOA agreed on this property, that this property meets criteria 1. It is non-conforming. It has unusual physical characteristics. There is no street front. It is very narrow. They agreed on that. Staff did not find that my client's property meets criteria 2, whether special circumstances make it infeasible to develop the property in compliance with the code. We believe, and the Board of Adjustment agreed, that the special circumstances of this property do make it infeasible to develop without the variance. The lot we're talking about today is just 24 feet deep. If my client were to try and renovate the home while complying with existing setback requirements on all four sides, the addition can only be 13 feet wide. Basically a 13-foot wide house. That isn't really feasible. In their report to the BOA, the staff suggested that Ms. Bonci negotiate lot line setbacks to extend the footprint of the addition to the north or west. However, Ms. Bonci's neighbors to the north have refused to do that already. He has attempted to discuss with them and they flatly refuse. The west side of the property is being transformed into the private open space, the garden. The property to the east is also problematic because it has a shed that sits directly on the property line, which makes a lot line setback impossible. So north, east, west, she's blocked. The application met criteria 3, as staff and the BOA agree that my client's plan does not exceed the intensity of development that is allowed in that area. But I do want to say something about that anyway. She's not trying to build a McMansion on this tiny little lot in South Capitol. When the code talks about intensity of use, I think it's referring to exactly that. Some kind of huge development that just doesn't fit the area. That's not what we're talking about here at all. Ms. Bonci's proposed renovation would actually reduce the size of the current home from 975 square feet to just 897 square feet. Her proposed addition consists of a 12 by 11 bedroom and a modest 8 by 4 closet and a modest bath. As BOA member Alexander noted, these are not expansive spaces. Criteria 4 asks the variances of the minimum variance that will make possible reasonable use of the land or structure. Staff said no, we in the BOA disagree. This really involves the question of whether the property at 1030 and a half actually fronts the street. In fact, this property does not sit directly on West Houghton. No part of it touches the curb it's 50 feet back from West Houghton. The house in front of it faces the street. This issue is critical because the code does not allow zero lot line construction along a street front. The code, that provision is intended to prevent homes from being built right up to the curb. Well, that makes sense. You wouldn't want that, which is not the situation here. It doesn't front the street. As I said, it's 50 feet back, tucked completely behind the front house. In its report to this body, the city attorney incorrectly states that the variance would bring construction right up to the access driveway. That's not true. It's a misstatement. The proposed addition that requires a zero lot line variance lies at the opposite end of the lot from the driveway. You see the house, if the driveway is here, the addition's over here. It does not go up to the driveway at all. The driveway, in fact, will only abut the large new private open space. After a significant discussion about this issue, the BOA agreed that this property does not have street frontage and granted the variance. We believe that decision is in keeping with the intent of the code. Finally, the staff said the application did not meet criteria 5 because the plan as is doesn't meet code requirements. We believe, and the BOA agreed, that the plan with the variance fully embraces the spirit of the code, which is simply to support development that conforms to community standards, as this plan does. Furthermore, as the city attorney, I think, said earlier, it benefits the public interest. The existing nonconformities with respect to private open space and for the north setback will be resolved. The intensity of land use will be lessened as the existing 975 square feet will go down to 897. The modifications will also resolve 3 existing encroachments onto the front property. In effect, it lessens the density of the neighbor's concern that she was talking about earlier, then increases the density of West Houghton Street. I'd like to go to some of Ms. Menedato's appeal points. In her written appeal, she outlined 9 reasons why she opposes this variance. In her first point of her appeal, Ms. Benedetto states that the Board of Adjustment's decision to grant my client's variance was arbitrary and capricious because my client's design doesn't comply with stated standards. In essence, she's saying the BOA, and by extension, this body and what we're doing here, are not allowed to approve any design plan that deviates from the code. If that were true, we wouldn't be here today. The variance process is written into the code specifically because the stated standards are subject to interpretation. Staff opposed my client's application because they decided her property has street frontage. It doesn't have street frontage, and the BOA disagreed with that finding, interpreted the rule differently, and granted the variance. That's how the variance process works. She may not be happy about Ms. Benedetto may not be happy about the BOA's decision, but it was not arbitrary and capricious. Simply because she interprets the code differently than they did. They just disagreed with her. Her second point states that the BOA ignored the legal definition of a street front lot line because the board believed that the rule would be changed in the next couple of years. This simply isn't true. It was never suggested at the hearing that the street lot line rule was likely to change, and therefore, quote unquote, the BOA could ignore it. In fact, board members strive to understand this complex rule and how it applies to 1030.5 West Houghton. Chair Winston actually stopped Senior Planner Daniel Alvarado in the middle of his presentation to say, I don't understand why this is considered a street setback. Mr. Alvarado explained staff's interpretation of the code. Nowhere in the code does it address landlocked lots like this. And Mr. Alvarado responded, no, maybe that's something we need to address that hasn't come up before. That's how unique this property is. It's never come up before. In the end, the BOA chose to differ with staff and not impose the street front lot line restriction on the property because it does not face the street. It faces the street, but from 50 feet away. It's not fronting the street. So I believe Ms. Benedetto is mistaken in her charge that the board simply disregarded the rule. They simply disagreed with applying it to this property. Ms. Benedetto then contests approval of my client's plan because it creates a nonconformity. While the proposed design does require a variance, it also reduces the number of nonconformities on this property from 3 to just 1. Plan reduces total lot coverage below 50% and successfully cures 2 existing encroachments. Ms. Benedetto correctly notes that the destruction of the shed will require approval of the historic board. However, the board has already previously approved demolition of the portion of that shed that encroaches onto 1030 in front. So we are optimistic the board will approve the rest of its demolition. Thirdly, she accuses the Board of Adjustment of ignoring evidence and testimony, which Ms. Benedetto again says makes its decision arbitrary and capricious. Specifically, Ms. Benedetto refers to one neighbor's refusal to negotiate a setback agreement because things were too close already, quote unquote. This issue also touches on Ms. Benedetto's concerns regarding fire risk in this neighborhood, which is quite densely developed. Ms. Bonci, the appellee, shares her concern and certainly doesn't want to see her neighborhood become another Maui. And my client directly addresses both those issues in her renovation design. Her plan actually increases the space between her home and her neighbors without requiring setback agreements with anyone. A simple review of the transcript from the BOA, which you have in front of you, proves this charge is unfounded. The BOA questioned staff as well as Ms. Bonci's agent and architect at length. Members clearly understood the issues at hand and considered all relevant factors in making their decision. Again, Ms. Benedetto's testimony was not ignored. It was just disagreed with. Fourthly, she challenges that the Board of Adjustment failed to apply the basic test of a variance, whether the property can be used as zoned. In this charge, Ms. Benedetto says my client justified the variance by stating that she would be bringing the property up to code as her only. She's right that bringing up the property to code is not one of the factors in justifying the variance, but she's wrong in that my client based her entire application solely on that intent or relied on that argument to win approval of the variance. Frankly, we believe this issue of the appeal is a bit overstated. Brings issue 5 of Ms. Benedetto argues that my client does not need to exceed the 40% lot coverage that the code says presides for reasonable use, which she brought up here today. To repeat, my client's plan actually reduces total lot coverage from the current 52% to 48%. That's one of the 3 nonconformities cured by her design. While Ms. Benedetto may have ideas about how my client might have designed her property differently within the 40% coverage, the fact is this design fully complies with the code because it meets the private open space requirements for lot coverage of up to 50%. Issues 6, 7, and 8 of her appeal regarding open space requirements for lots less than 2,000 square feet, lot coverage over 40%, and setback agreements were addressed and refuted by Mr. Saris, my client's architect, in his BOA testimony and his response to the staff report included in your packets. Mr. Saris is here today if you have any specific technical questions for him as well. I noted that Ms. Benedetto also talked today about common open space, which frankly I'm confused by. It's 2 separate lots, the front house and the back house. I mean, I would think a common open space might refer to like a development of several different dwellings. She's creating private open space there, but I don't understand the requirement of common open space. But perhaps Mr. Saris can talk more about that afterwards. Number 9, Ms. Benedetto says Ms. Bonchi's intent to age in place in this home is irrelevant to any decision regarding the zoning variance. On this point, she is absolutely correct. We are not arguing today that Ms. Bonchi's potential future use of the property should have any bearing on whether this body affirms her variance. A response to Ms. Benedetto's appeal rests firmly on our belief that the BOA made the right decision in granting my client's variance because her plan satisfies all 5 criteria for approving the variance. As I said earlier, the BOA, as well as the governing body, are not constrained to a strict interpretation of the code. Rather than searching for ways to change design to meet every requirement of Chapter 14, the BOA and this body can consider the spirit and intent of the code and ask, is this variance in keeping with the kind of development the community wants to see happen? The Board of Adjustment did just that. If you read the transcript, they spent quite a bit of time discussing how this property had been and would be used. Some members thought it must have been a storage space or a shed because it's so narrow and the ceilings are so low. But in fact, the building has always been used as a dwelling, albeit a modest one. Even after her renovation, Ms. Bonchi's new home will be very modest by modern standards. You don't see many 897 square foot houses being built today. With this renovation, Ms. Bonchi is attempting to give new life to a historic dwelling that otherwise might never be revitalized. Her design reimagines a structure that has stood on the spot for nearly a century. It incorporates the original adobe walls and retains the authentic Pueblo style, ensuring the new home will fit perfectly among its neighbors in this charming historic community. At the same time, her design actually reduces the footprint of the residence, increases the distance between her home and her neighbors, and creates a large outdoor private space that will be the only part of the home visible from the street. It's a remarkable achievement, and one the BOA applauded when they approved the 1 minimal variance necessary to complete it. Again, a 91 square foot variance. 13 feet 5 inches on the east side of the house. After they've stated, Ms. Benedetto and Ms. Perovsky opposed the application. Ms. Bonchi respects their position, as she does those of all of her neighbors. She appreciates their concerns about inappropriate development, and she has gone to great lengths to educate them about her plans and to ask for feedback on her application. As it turns out, once she explains her design and her reasons for needing the variance, Ms. Bonchi enjoys significant support in the neighborhood. In your packets, you'll find 34 letters signed by 40 of her neighbors, including several descendants of the original owners of the property. All of them confirmed their understanding of Ms. Bonchi's variance request and expressed their full and complete support of her application. Ms. Benedetto's appeal cites a New Mexico Supreme Court ruling that says any decision by our governing body that ignores material issues raised by the parties renders their right to be heard illusory. That means as adjudicators, you all are required to consider the input of all those affected by this application, including both those who oppose it and those who support it. In front of you today, you had 2 people that opposed it. In front of you, you have also 40 people that are in favor of it in the neighborhood. Ms. Benedetto opposes my client's variance. From her testimony and from her appeal, written appeal papers, it appears that she may oppose all variants. While they have a right to their opinion, the variance process is contained within the zoning code to address special circumstances like those presented by Ms. Bonchi's property. This process gives the body the opportunity to consider both the spirit and intent of the code and criteria, and to allow reasonable minimum variances that will enable appropriate development of properties that might otherwise never be improved. We respectfully request that this body deny the appeal and affirm the BOA's decision to grant the variance. And we'll stand for questions, and thank you for your.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. We go now, the applicant has an opportunity, should you so choose, to cross-examine the appellant or the appellant's witnesses. You're not obligated to, but it's an opportunity for each side to cross-examine the other if you so choose.
Why stand?
Right where you are. And use the microphone because it has to go into the record. And then whoever you're speaking to will have to come up and
Is it her turn to?
after your turn. You have the first opportunity if you choose. Reasonable amount of time, probably 10 minutes max of just, if you want to raise some questions, now would be the time to do it. And the opportunity is provided to both sides.
Well, her witness, Ms. Pervosky, her testimony at the BOA was somewhat similar. She seems to be under the impression that the house is going to be increased in size, when in fact the exact opposite is true. I just wanted to point that out, and if she was here, I would ask her that question.
Is she still online? You're perfectly within your rights to ask her if she's to turn that statement into a question and see if she knows what you're asking.
Ms. Pervosky, or can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you aware that Ms. Bonchi's plan actually decreases the size of the house as opposed to increase it? And once you're aware of that, would you still oppose her variance?
Yes, I guess I'm confused because it's going to be moved from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom.
It's a unique design that actually lowers the square footage of the house by doing that.
Okay, so how about the setbacks?
Well, the variance. I'm the one that's asking the questions.
Yeah, I would prefer it if it's not a conversation, but rather a series of questions.
So now you're aware that the house is going to be smaller, and are you also aware that there's off-street parking on the property where there's no parking there's no necessity to park on the street. There's a driveway that fits for both houses. 2 cars for each house, in fact.
I'm not sure,
Well,
but what I
very
understood is that you're taking down 2 structures to make the primary structure conforming. So there's like 2 non-conforming structures are going to be demolished. And then
I'm trying to kind of ask you, your testimony was concerned about increasing density. And in fact, this design, and you were talking about walking your dog and all of the cars in the street, and this design actually decreases the density. So I was just asking about that.
okay, so
that's all.
Okay, so if
Thank
you're
you.
asking a question, I'm going to say, like, do I need to walk off the street to walk my dog down the street? Or
No,
is
you're
there-
aware that the residence we're talking about is 50 feet away from the street. But thank you.
I know, but that entire street is very
Say
condensed.
thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
That's all.
I think that completes the question, but appreciate your being available. You still have a few minutes to ask questions if you so choose.
Can I ask questions to Ms. Benedetto?
Absolutely.
Ms. Benedetto, I think you mentioned in your presentation that my client had not attempted to get variance affidavits from the neighbors Are you aware that actually she did try?
My understanding from the testimony of Mr. Sears, which is on page 22 of the transcript, he says, if we don't get this variance, then we're going to have to approach the neighbors on the north and west. Apparently, again, in the packet, you have the neighbor on the west, Jennings, telling you all that they're not going to give the setback variance. And again, what you're not being told, and it's not in conformance with the code, is that there has to be a setback, a separation between the existing, the variance, the lot line, and the structure. So when they make it sound like it's one.
Yeah, I think you should try to
Okay, fine.
answer the question
What was-
very directly.
The question was.
No, she has not. According to the testimony on February 6th, she had not made an attempt except to talk to Jennings the night before to ask her for
So
that.
up until, February 6th.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Beninato, don't go too far because you have the same opportunity for cross-examining the applicant or witnesses for, let's try to keep it within the same amount of time, which was roughly less than 10 minutes, given the back and forth.
We have closing, right?
We
Or
haven't
do have a
even gotten
closing?
close.
Okay, we're not close to closing yet. Okay. I want to ask Ms. Bonci a question, please. Can you come up and get sworn in, please? Oh, I'm asking her a question directly. I put her down on my witness list as a possible hostile witness.
Well, Madam City Attorney, can you help us out here?
How about we ask the question and the applicant can identify who can answer the question?
Sure.
She hasn't testified and hasn't been presented as a witness, so. go
She's
ahead.
on my witness list.
Yeah, but her counsel is here to represent her. So why don't you ask the question? We'll figure out who can best answer it.
Okay. I'm wondering when Ms. Bonci went around trying to get the form letters signed for support of this after the BOA meeting, after I appealed, when she talked to Ms. Martinez on Don Fernando, whether she told Ms. Martinez that she was selling 1030 West Houghton almost immediately, as soon as she could, she was going to get rid of that. She was going to sell it. That's my question.
I think your attorney can potentially respond to that.
Mayor Weber, counsel. So if the witness
said-
doesn't have personal knowledge, then the person with personal knowledge should testify.
All right, well, then let's bring her up and
The answer, but.
You're able to swear that it's the truth?
let's get the correct person in front of the mic. We'll have you sworn and you can answer the question and that'll be that. Madam Clerk, can you take care of the oath, please?
Hi, I'm Francesca Bonci,
Can you please state your address?
1030 West Houghton Street.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you.
So could you repeat the question, please, Ms. Beninato?
My question is, you've talked to Ms. Martinez on Don Fernando about your setback. Is that correct? Asked her to sign your-
Where does she live on Don Fernando?
Witnesses, we have 2 microphones if
I
you'd like to
spoke
use.
to over 50 people in the neighborhood. So I cannot remember exactly that conversation. But my plan is to redevelop this house. And if I can't do it here and I can't do it in district court, okay, because I'll go to district court to get this variance, then I'm going to be forced to sell that property as is. And someone else is going to go through this whole process all over again.
Okay, I'd like to call Daniel Alvarado, please, and ask him a question.
Can I also add something?
No,
Yeah,
and ask
no,
that
really, you only get to answer the question, but there'll be a summary statement later.
Daniel, will you come up and get sworn in, please?
Ms. Beninato, can you use this microphone? So that way we can use both microphones? That'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Alvarado, if you please raise your right hand, state your name and your address.
Daniel Alvarado, 410 Bishop's Lodge, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, well, here we go.
I was wondering if that was going to happen. Hey, this still works. That's not plugged in.
Why don't we just hit pause for a minute while we determine whether we've got supplementary energy coming our way. Everybody take a deep breath and stay in place so that nobody bumps into anybody else, and stay safe. I rest my case as to not bumping into people. Big's got his flashlight. If everybody could stay at ease, we are awaiting information about the electrical utility and whether we will or will not have lights restored and power restored. So please just stand down for a few minutes while we get more information.